Hey everybody, it is Mel Salaver here, your registered dietitian with the Show Up Fitness internship. Today in class, we talked about hunger hormones. We talked about how to support our clients when they comment on their bodies. And we also talked about this idea of cheat meals and why I loathe that term and some better strategies and ways to navigate food and how we talk about it in our relationships to it so that we can better support our human beings. So more on this. Watch us, join us, come to class.
Do proteins and fat cause the release of more leptin or decrease the release of ghrelin? So if we're going to talk about ghrelin and leptin, I think my first question to everybody in this group is, have you heard of these two hormones? They are called our hunger hormones. Do you know what they are? So I can give you just a little bit of an overview. But I kind of laughed when I heard the question because and I think it was Tyson who asked it. He's not on our call now, but Tyson, I know you'll watch this because you're so good and you watch all of it. Police. I have a lot of people talking about thyroid issues and Hashimoto's. Yeah, so this is not directly in line with that, but what I will say is, okay, if we look at, well, I'll just give you the overview. If we look at ghrelin, which is our hunger hormone, right? So it's the hormone that controls our hunger, our appetite in our body, produced in the stomach, and it sends signals to the brain whenever it feels like it's hungry. So as a rule of thumb, when we have a significant amount of body fat, we have lower ghrelin levels, which is why we have that drive to eat, right? While underweight individuals or people who have lower body fat percentages have higher ghrelin levels, so they don't have as much of a drive to eat. If we look at leptin, now the opposite of our hunger hormone, leptin controls our satiety. That is produced in our fat cells, and it tells our brain that we have enough energy in the form of adipose tissue or fat tissue to survive. So that's the thing that would stop us from eating. So again, whenever we're in a calorie deficit, we're eating less than the energy that we might be burning or utilizing. We're telling our body that we want to use the current resources we have as energy. So these are the two hormones that just drive our hunger and our fullness. So Tyson is asking, again, coming back to that question, do proteins and fat cause the release of more leptin or decrease the release of ghrelin? It isn't just related to protein or fat or even carbohydrate. And to be honest with you, I'm not constantly talking about hunger hormones with people. I just don't get that nitty gritty. So I would have to dig into the research to be specific about if those impact leptin more or decrease ghrelin more. The way that I often, if we're educating about it, right, in this context, ultimately what we're looking at is satiety, and knowing that each of these three macronutrients are going to overall impact the satiety. Your meals are going to impact what allows for you to feel better after eating a meal or physically satisfied. But then there's also an element of satiety or satisfaction that comes from the meal itself, right? So taste, texture, crunchiness, and each of us have a different preference for what that might be. So while each of these things do impact the physiological drive to eat, the act of eating and what allows for us to feel satisfied is about more than just that. So yeah, I don't know if Chris, you have more even context into that, but I was trying to figure out, I don't know exactly how to answer this question because I don't know that it's more or less. More, I think the more important question would be what is this whole meal composed of, and what is this person's what is like the state of their body or like their hunger just going into that.
Yeah, I
there's
think
like
that's great
multiple
because
drivers.
when for a long time, like in the early 2000s, they were really big on, how everything spiked your glucose levels. And that was, a big point. Even I remember way back in the day in college, like that's something we had to learn, like what's the glycemic index for bread. And now we've kind of learned exactly what you're saying right there is it's not really about that micro aspect. It's more about the macro aspect of what's happening overall for the day, week, and so forth.
Yeah. It's multifaceted. So, I think the thing that comes to mind with me even, when you mention that or glycemic indexes, people who go crazy over high fructose corn syrup, right? And like no one is consuming high fructose corn syrup in isolation, like as its own specific thing. They're having it amongst other things, like when we eat protein, the where we're getting our protein from, like are you having a ribeye? Are you having a sirloin steak? Are you having chicken thighs? Are you having, I have chicken breast here that I'm snacking on. Like it's not just protein. Like there's some level of fat to that. If you seasoned it in some capacity, there's some carbohydrates to it. Like it's more nuanced than just one specific piece. So I think my love note encouragement here is like, as you're learning like new terms and kind of the physiological events to how we eat and our hormones, if you will, I don't want you to get too hung up on like individual things because no one is eating like very individual things. There was another question that I had actually gotten. I didn't send this one to you, Jack, from Jack. For last week, and we didn't get to it before we got in the discussion, but I want to make sure I ask it. So he asked, I wanted to know if you could talk a little more about how to respond to someone when they comment on their body, like saying they're fat. I know you talked on the subject, but it happened a couple times this week at the physical therapy clinic I work at. And one time a therapist responded with the "you're not fat" response. I was also part of the conversation and just stayed silent when that happened, mostly because I was just letting the PT do the talking. I haven't been able to attend the meeting. So, he's looking to understand if someone is commenting on their body in any particular fashion, but I feel like this is a very common one that we have all encountered, whether it be in the context of your professional life or even your personal life, coming from like friends or siblings or parents, anybody, where it almost can feel like there's some validation to what they're looking for. If they're commenting, I feel fat, I look fat, something along those lines. And there is definitely a way that we can respond that might be supportive of this, and there are ways that we can respond that would not help the situation. So what I will tell you is the way this physical therapist responded in Chuck's case was as he intuitively recognized, my hope is based on the conversations we've had to this point, like that is not appropriate, nor is it helpful. I understand that the gut reaction might be, telling them you're totally not fat, or that's not the case, or you haven't gained weight, or any of this. It's not helpful because all that does, and this is a larger theme in, I'm going to say, fitness culture and health culture and society at large, is if we say that, then all we're doing is we're perpetuating this idea that fat is something that you don't want to be, right? So we are continuing to fat shame or like put being fat in this category as something that is problematic. What is interesting about this as well, if we dig deeper into it, is there really isn't an official definition of fatness. Now we do have like clinical markers for obesity, but as we know, that uses BMI, and that's also problematic for a number of different reasons, because it doesn't take into context like different populations, um, and the types of people, just based on the ethos of where that came from, right? So, you know, ultimately, to answer this question, like, what is helpful? Like, what is the helpful comment response to someone sharing that they feel that they are fat? What I want you to think about, if this is the case and this is a comment that is shared with you, is, you know, I want you to react to this comment as if your friend or your family member or your client patient told you that they're having some other big emotion. React to it as though this is an emotion, right? So as if they just shared with you, I feel sad, or I feel angry, or I feel depressed. React to it from that standpoint, because if we look at it as though they're expressing an emotion, then what do we usually do if someone shares these things? We actually ask them to tell us more, right? And so we can better understand what they're trying to tell us, what they want to say. We can hold that space for them, and you are all in a place to be able to do that. Like, as human beings, we're able to do that. So you could respond with, oh, like why, why are you feeling that way? Kind of what's going on? Do you want to talk about it? And, in turn, you're not implying any judgment that suggests that's a bad thing or it's wrong. You're just asking them to explain more about how you feel. What might come out of this comment, again, particularly if this person has internalized fatness as something that is bad, is they might share that they don't feel beautiful or attractive or handsome or any of these things. And the comment and how you could share with them that to address this piece could be that there's many ways for us to feel beautiful and attractive that have nothing to do with our weight, like our clothing, our hygiene, our hair. There's so many different ways in which we can tap into that state of feeling good in our body that has nothing to do with the size of our body. So that's one element. The other thing could be, again, if it's just not feeling good in their body that ends up coming out of this, same thing. Like, what are some other things that we could focus on? Is it maybe doing more gentle exercise? Is it doing more vigorous exercise? Not because we're trying to change the size and shape of our body in that moment, but just because sometimes when we slow down, it's easier to hear our breath and feel our heartbeat and understand where we have aches and pains in our body. Sometimes if you're talking particularly to high performers, like, they like to push the limits of their body and see where they're at. So that's another way to bring them back to center. Eating a good meal if they're recognizing they're hungry and choosing foods that feel nourishing to them. If, this is an expression of anxiety or insecurity or lower emotions, more depressive emotions, depending on your relationship to this person, again, if this is a client, like, are they working with a counselor, a therapist, someone that that you can refer them to like better support that context, seeing that they have a session, being able to connect them with somebody. If they express that, they're not feeling healthy, again, health, like, I'm going to say, even this acknowledgement of fatness, like, there is no clear definition of health. It is something that is going to look and feel and be very different on each of us because of how we choose to live our lives and the things that bring us joy and the things that take energy from us. So again, what could be things that in this case could be suggested as being helpful for that? If we're talking about food specifically, is it having a nourishing meal? Is that where exercise can come back into play? Like, knowing you are working with them in their physical body, like, could we get back to training? So, just bringing this to a different place, adjusting the context, approaching this from a place of, well, how are you feeling? Looking at this as a feeling versus a statement as something weird to be that is good or bad, could be a much more appropriate and helpful context for them. And I would say like it's also a good reference point for each of us, like holding space for people at various intervals, and because we can kind of recognize our own biases to internalize fatness or as being a bad thing, or some of this that I think perpetuates fitness culture at large. So that is for you, Chuck. I did not want to forget to highlight it because I thought it was a really important question and something that I know we have all navigated at one point or another. And yeah, it's just an important point of recognition for each of us to be aware of. So, any thoughts from any of you on that, or even kind of the hunger component that we talked about a little bit earlier? Oh, Tyson, you're here. I feel like you jumped in after I was talking about it.
Hi there.
Yeah.
So I had a question about, this is somewhat similar. It's not about calling yourself fat, but I have a client that actually mentioned today that they were really upset. They're going through some stressful situations. She's an elderly client and her husband's going through some dementia. So she's having a hard time tackling like caregiving and all these different things. And she talks about eating like 5 Oreos last night. And she was really upset about it. And I've been wanting to help provide her with some nutrition help, but I'm just wondering what things to bring up, or how should I go about maybe providing that value for her when it comes, because whenever she's stressed, it's stressful eating. So whenever she's stressed, she'll reach for the sugar or reach for a Lime-A-Rita of all things.
Were we talking about that? Are you the one who mentioned Lime-A-Ritas last week?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah. This is the one that goes for, reaches
person.
for the Lime-A-Ritas, the sugar alcohol bomb.
Yeah. So the